I want to explore a certain angle of the masculine and feminine expressions or dimensions of love. And the distinction I want to make is between presentation versus substance. Now, if we look at love as, or being loving in a mature sense, as facilitating human needs, that if I want to be loving to you, that I behave in such a way as to support your security, your survival, your sense of love and belonging, your sense of self-esteem, becoming your self-development, becoming your best version of yourself, bringing your gifts to the world, creating abundance, and moving into a sense of legacy or transcendence beyond the self, then we have a very clear direction of what being loving is. There's two expressions of being loving, however. One is the delivery, the presence, or the journey, and the other is the destination, or the outcome. If we want to be loving on a feminine level, we make sure that a person feels heard, for example, feels welcome. We smile. We behave in such a way at a pace, at an intensity that puts a person at ease. And this is feminine love. And a con artist relies on feminine love more than anything else, without substance, in order to facilitate a con. If I want you to write me a check for millions of dollars for charity that doesn't exist, certainly I can put a gun to your head and kidnap you and do the various things of that. But I can also charm you. I can put on the courtesy, the warmth, attune myself to your every whim and need such that you feel at ease and you want to support such a charity, etc. And so you have the feminine form of love, which is about the delivery, the presentation. The masculine form of love is about the outcome, the impact, and it is about the destination. Where is this leading? And truly so, a sustainable and balanced, whole, holistic sense of love requires both. We require going into a doctor, and this is where our Western medical system breaks down, we require a positive outcome delivered in a healing, in a medicinal, in a wholesome way. When children go into early surgery as infants and are separated from their parents, as in the case of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, sometimes in order to ensure that a bone is healed, they are separated from their relatives for a period of hours or days without any ability to attune or explain this to an impact. So there's a trauma around separation and the unknown and fear of survival. Then their body is strapped into some kind of a papoose so that they cannot release the fight-flight chemicals in the body, such that this trauma and terror becomes PTSD. But the bone is in fact healed. And the proud surgeon delivers the baby. Your bone is healed. Here's your baby back. And PTSD is not considered because the wound has been transferred from the more masculine domain of the self, which is the physical body, into the more feminine domain, which is the psychological experience. Now, these partitions are a little bit abstract because feelings, as just one example, thoughts and feelings, considered the internal region of the self as opposed to the outer body, are in fact held within the physiology. So one could say that the wound has been transferred from a more dense version of the body to a more subtle form of the body. And that the more subtle form of the body, being more feminine than the density of the bone, there is a feeling of success, even though Ted Kaczynski was not able to bond effectively with other human beings for the rest of his life, that this began with a traumatic hospital visit, that this led to national terror as he designed bombs to blow up medical equipment that was responsible for his dissociation with human beings for the rest of his life in a culture that lacked the sophistication, that lacked the humanity to consider his feminine side, how he actually felt in his body going through the medical procedure, as opposed to simply whether a bone or a given substance was balanced out in the process of giving him PTSD. Now, we are a very presentation-based culture. More and more it's about the business card, the web page, the physical perception, the cosmetic surgery, the level of tan or muscularness, the kind of car we drive, the brand labels that we carry. So in a presentation-based culture, one of the ways to win or emphasize is to, in a capitalist overlay of a presentation culture, is to do a better job of presenting a worse underlying outcome. And the way you can look at an outcome or a destination is through statistics. If giving arsenic to 1,000 patients makes 100% of them worse, then you could call it a negative outcome, an unloving outcome. If performing cataract surgery leaves 98% of all people to have a more functional, safe life, then that would be considered a positive outcome, at least for the 98%. And so the outcome, the destination, is about impact. It's when you arrive. In a trip, you might take a horrible 36-hour flight, laying over here, doing this, etc., to arrive at the most beautiful and pristine island. So you save money on the journey. You have a horrific journey of getting there. But once you arrive, it is magnificent. So again, poor presentation, magnificent outcome. The best forms of love, of course, come with a great presentation, a great presence, a great journey to a magnificent outcome. In areas of professional expertise, it is tempting sometimes to sacrifice outcome for presentation, particularly when you have an ignorant client base and an ignorant culture. Because if no one really knows what the difference is between great therapy, good therapy, and terrible therapy, as an example, but everyone knows the difference between a nice marbled plush office in a good part of town with the right type of beard and spectacles or whatever the presentation is to say this is a prestigious and important therapy office with numerous degrees and medals and this and that and the other, then, whether you feel good or bad or indifferent during the process, your $300 bill will perhaps seem more justified than someone else who visits a little mud hut in a third world country, has a transcendent experience, and isn't entirely sure if they're being scammed or whether or not they should pay a $50 bill for one of the most meaningful, insightful hours of their life. or whether, in fact, it in some ways is unspiritual to have a holy person offer even a place of donations. And so there's this tension between the destination, the impact, the arrival, the statistical outcome, and the journey, the procedure, the presentation. Now, in a couple of examples, you have the gruff, competent brain surgeon who saves you or your child's life, but has little or no personal skills, and you feel a little bit awkward, but 98% of his patients recover full access to their brain, versus the smiling fool. There was a story about a delivery nurse who, after 24 hours of labor, was still smiling and encouraging, and it's all going to work out, and there's, anything I can do. Would you like hot towels? And change of nurse. Doctor took one look at the patient, said, you need this, 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 within the next 20 minutes, no bedside manner, etc. The baby was successfully delivered, and through a competency, an unusual competency, but a poor bedside manner. Whether or not the bedside manner, the journey, the feminine presence and form of love of getting there is more or less important than the outcome, in part is determined by how important the outcome is. Would you rather be treated by a gruff brain surgeon that's going to restore your capacity to think and function for the rest of your life, versus a beautiful, perhaps even a very seductive and charming and witty and humorous nurse who administers you arsenic and kills you because in all that humor, etc., the labels were a little bit small, the jokes were so interesting, they managed to confuse medicine with toxicity, at least for your body. You also have this dynamic in personal relationships where you can have very sincere, very honest, very plain partners who have enormous integrity in working hard and faithfully to grow a relationship, to uphold a marriage, to tell the truth, and do the things that are going to help build a strong future together. Contrasted with a cheater with enormous flair, enormous charm. Wears all the great clothes, brightens up the room with their smile, but is having secret affairs with your best friend right and left. And again, which is the more beneficial form of love? Is the journey, the flair, the sophistication, and sincerity with which the lies and the betrayal is delivered, is that enough in your eyes in a given moment to offset the horrendous consequences of losing friendships, needing to have a divorce, etc., because ultimately you can't have a marriage with someone who will lie and have an affair with your best friend, any more than you can have a best friend retain that title who sleeps with your partner. And so in the general culture, we have a bias towards smiling and sophistication. And so the NSA, the National Security Agency, when implementing a number of the rather totalitarian anti-terrorism measures, was doing its work and being perceived as rather autocratic. One of the main things that they focus on is the videos and signage and courteous warmth, etc., with which people are greeted. The face of the NSA in public and in airports, etc., is boosted, even as the underbelly is, breaking the law, doing this, that, and the other, to its people. Would you rather a witty politician who lies to your face and tells a joke about it and makes you feel comfortable, or would you like someone like Jimmy Carter who's going to tell you the truth, but not always make you feel sophisticated, not always seem like they're as witty or dominant as some other president like Reagan? These are two faces of love. And depending on the situation, the masculine face of love may be more or less important than the feminine. I would say that with a trauma therapist, you're going to need both. Because if you have a gruff, sociopathic trauma therapist, you're not going to go into the terrain to do the healing work. On the other hand, if you have a very charming trauma therapist who has sex with their patients, you're not going to do any healing of trauma either. You're going to deepen the wound. And so there is a balance between masculine and feminine love. And we really need both. In most of the important areas of our life, the real healing comes when we combine. When we love enough to understand the underlying data, when we love enough to become competent, when we love enough to care about the outcome and the impact, and we love enough to be present, we love enough to be kind, we love enough to attune and be sensitive to our patients, then you have the synergy of the masculine and the feminine, of the emphasis on the journey and the destination. That's the sweet spot.